Spoilers.
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 Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. I like that word.
I thought you might.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Brief History, and today we're going to be looking at one of the more enigmatic Time Lords, the War Chief. Despite only making one on-screen appearance and only a handful of appearances in the expanded media, this character has had a huge impact on the fandom due to their possible connections with the Master, possibly even being one and the same. Now, for the purposes of this video, there will not be a definitive answer provided, nor are we going to go into every reference to this possible link. This video is merely to provide an overall look at the character's history. Who they may or may not be is up for you to decide. According to some sources such as Doctor Who and the Doomsday Weapon, which was the name given to the novelisation of Colony in Space, the novelisation of Terror of the Autons, the comic Flashback, the novel Invasion of the Cat People, and the novel Goth Opera, and more debatably, the short story The Legacy of Gallifrey, and the unpublished and unlicensed novel Time's Champion, the War Chief was an earlier incarnation of the Time Lord who would later go on to adopt the name of the Master. Other sources, such as the Doctor Who role-playing game book CIA File Extracts and The Legions of Death, suggests that whilst they were in fact two independently different Time Lords, they did previously form some kind of alliance. Although it is worth saying that the sourcebooks for this game did in fact suggest that the Monk and the Master were one and the same. The 1980s board game The Game of Time and Space would depict the Master with a likeness resembling the War Chief, but again would also state that they were also the Monk. However, to flip things on its head for a moment, the Big Finish story The Home Guard features a seemingly earlier incarnation of the Master.
I'm counting on you all to defeat the Doctor.
Yeah, but if it's just a case of the Doctor...
No buts, Ben. You'll do whatever I say. I am the Master, and you will obey me.
But in 2020, writer Simon Gurrier confirmed that hints made by the Master during the story about serving a grander plan was in fact intended to be a hint to the War Games. And the incarnation featured in the Home Guard was the one that regenerated into the War Chief, leading into the War Games. However, he also admitted that he couldn't quite remember what he was thinking at the time of writing, and so it is very much open to interpretation. Other accounts, such as the novels Time Worm Exodus and Divided Loyalties, and the reference book A Brief History of the Time Lords, made it clear that the War Chief was an entirely other Time Lord, separate from the Master, who was also known in his time as Magnus. The novel The Dark Path, which debatably depicted one of the earliest meetings between the Doctor and the Master, also had a deleted scene, later published in the charity anthology Perfect Timing, in which the Master specifically referenced the War Chief as a separate mutual friend. Although author David A. McIntee did acknowledge that the novel, as published, did leave the connection between the two, once again, open to interpretation. Lastly, Big Finish's recent audio adaptation of the novel Goth Opera makes an interesting change from the novel. In the novel, several of the Doctor's former classmates are listed, with a mention of Magnus, but not the Master, leading many to speculate this as evidence to them being one and the same. However, the audio adaptation list includes both Magnus and Koschei, with this latter name being either an early alias or true name of the Master.
My contemporaries and I grew up to take our responsibilities seriously.
Ah, unlike my year, I begin to see.
Yes. Ushus, Mortimus, Magnus, your beloved Koschei, all graduates of Barusa's Academy for Scoundrels.
Implying that they are separate Time Lords and not one and the same as the novel implies. So with that identity debate out of the way, let's get on to looking at some of the War Chief's more confirmed incarnations. I'm going to get really tired of doing that in this video. According to the novel Divided Loyalties, Magnus's first incarnation was a friend of the Doctor's during his academy years, who, along with the Rani, the Monk, the Master, and others attended the Academy at the same time and formed a collective known as the Decca. The comic Flashback would show another undisclosed incarnation of Magnus but who was seemingly not the first, as he would often mock the first Doctor for still hobbling around in his old body. And in the novel Invasion of the Cat People, the second Doctor would recall advising Magnus to be more careful with his regenerations, suggesting he may have already regenerated several times before ever leaving Gallifrey. The comic flashback reveals that at some point Magnus attempted to drain a large amount of Artron energy from the time vortex. The Doctor, however, realised that the large amount of Artron energy was in fact a sentient being and managed to stop Magnus's plans. However, whilst the Doctor was commended, Magnus never forgave him, and the Doctor would go on to view Magnus's thirst for glory by any means as unethical, leading to the two becoming bitter enemies. Whilst he doesn't actually appear, Magnus is also mentioned in the short story Save Yourself from the Target storybook. This story reveals that the Warlord discovered Magnus in a Trastevarian jail. Now close to death at this point, Magnus regenerated into a new incarnation. As seen in the War Games, this new incarnation allied himself with the Warlords, adopting the title of the War Chief. He helped the Warlords abduct soldiers and other fighters from Earth's history, with the intention to make them all fight each other until they were left with the hardiest warriors and use them to conquer Mutter's Spiral. He also aided them in giving them space-time travel in the forms of TARDIS-like machines named Side Rats. Upon meeting the Doctor, the two old friends recognised each other, with the War Chief acknowledging the Doctor's change of appearance since their last meeting.
You may have changed your appearance, but I know who you are.
The two ended up in an unsteady alliance against the Warlords, but with neither side really trusting or truly believing the intentions of the other. In the end, the Doctor was unable to return all the soldiers to their places and times, and so he called in the Time Lords to clear up the mess. And subsequently, the War Chief's alliance with the Doctor was discovered by the Warlords, who executed him. Now at this point, it's worth mentioning the War Games in colour, which during various scenes featuring the War Chief purposely used musical scores for the Master from Series 3. Whilst the music cues are obviously intended to be a reference to the theory, there is nothing explicitly said on screen that confirms that he is supposed to be an incarnation of the Master. And whilst after his execution scene we do briefly hear the sound of regeneration energy, we do not see him turn into anyone in particular, leaving his next incarnation's identity a matter of debate. And the fact that a regeneration energy sound is heard simply references the fact that he is a Time Lord, not a specific Time Lord. Either way, as he was a Time Lord, this was not the end for the War Chief, who regenerated into a new incarnation. But once again, there are various accounts of this. The novel Time Worm Exodus stated that after his execution, the remaining Warlords recovered his body and during their retreat to the Warlord homeworld, noticed that he was in fact still alive. Wanting to study him, they placed his body in the ship's hold, where he began to regenerate into a new incarnation. However, due to the extensiveness of his injuries, the regeneration failed, leaving the War Chief's new incarnation looking like two bodies fused into one, with extra deformed limbs and an incomplete skull growing out of the back of his head. But despite this, he continued to ally himself with the Warlords, helping them to break the time loop that surrounded their homeworld as put in place by the Time Lords during the trial after the War Games, and eventually travelling to Germany during the Second World War. Taking on a disguise to hide his grotesque appearance, he took on the name Felix Kriegliter. He would go on to serve as an occult advisor to Hitler himself, with his intentions to change history and take control of the Nazi Party for himself. According to the novel Players, during this time he also served as a form of medical advisor to Bormann, who was concerned with Hitler's health. The War Chief was later confronted by the Seventh Doctor, who intended to take the latter's healthy body and remaining regenerations. However, once again, thanks to the Doctor's intervention, the War Chief's plans were discovered and his base of operations in Drachenberg's castle was destroyed. Moments before his base was destroyed, he was seen by Ace, engulfed in flames and having reverted back to his previous appearance from the War Games. The implication being that he had begun to regenerate and his appearance had been reset rather like the 11th Doctor's was in Time of the Doctor. However, Ace had to flee the base before she could see what became of him. Now, at the time of recording, this is the last confirmed appearance of the War Chief. However, as previously stated, there are other accounts of events that happened following the War Games. The previously mentioned Doctor Who role-playing game story Legions of Death depicted a post-War Games incarnation of the War Chief. This incarnation intended to take control of the Roman Empire, overthrowing and hypnotically controlling the Emperor Claudius, and by giving the Empire advanced technology intended to not only take over Earth, but eventually the entire galaxy. This plan was foiled, however, and the War Chief once again escapes in a TARDIS. But even then, this is possibly still not the last time the War Chief was seen. The War King from the novel The Infinity Doctors may have been a future incarnation of the War Chief, and possibly also the Master, as they claimed to have held the titles such as Chief and Master. These latter two accounts, however, are once again debated. As previously stated, the Legions of Death conflates the Master and the Monk into one entity, and the Infinity Doctors once again falls into the age-old debate of if the Master and the War Chief are one and the same, which again is still very much a debated point. In the end, however, going by narrative evidence and how different accounts of his regeneration stack up, we have at least 4 different confirmed incarnations of the War Chief. His first incarnation from his days at the Academy, a latter incarnation seen in the comic Flashback, the War Chief from the War Games, and the Felix Kriegliter incarnation from Time Worm Exodus. Now personally, I don't think he's the Master. I think that the War Chief is completely separate from the likes of others such as the Master and the Monk. My reasoning for this is because by making the War Chief the Master, it makes what is, let's be honest, quite an interesting villain just very generic and kind of just a bit boring in my opinion. But again, that is just my opinion. As for all the other possibilities, well, that is entirely up to you, and I for one would certainly be interested to hear your thoughts on whether you think he is or is not the Master in the comments below. However, I do appreciate this is a very debated topic, so please, 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 please be respectful of others' opinions in the comments. Just because you may or may not think he is the Master doesn't mean anyone else is wrong. There is no confirmed answer for this. He may be, he may not be. Either opinion is just as valid as the other. Please be respectful. But for now, that brings to a close another A Brief History. As always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, share, it really helps me out a lot, and be sure to check out the description below for a link to my Patreon. All of your donations are greatly received. The smallest donation gets your name at the end of my videos, and I cannot thank you enough for all your continued support. I salute you all, and I will see you with another video very soon.